Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast with Austin and Marty. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about ketogenic diets, keto myths, keto misconceptions, all kinds of keto goodness and badness, if you will.
All things keto.
Yes. So we've been kind of brewing on this one for a couple weeks now. We're going to do it. We were going to do it before, but I felt like we needed to just think on it a little bit more and kind of how we wanted to approach it, because a lot of people have, there's tons of podcasts on ketogenic diets. There's tons of articles, information. It's nothing new. But I do think that how people view keto and how people use keto has evolved a lot in probably very short time. I mean, literally within the last couple years, it just completely changed. So we want to make sure that if you are using it, that you use it correctly. And if when you shouldn't be using it, and talk about all the things that the media is portraying and a lot of these supplement companies and what have you. So that's where we are today.
Yeah, the resurgence, we'll call it, of ketogenic dieting is kind of almost to the point of being obnoxious. I remember being in, I forget what the exact group is called on Facebook, but something along the lines of ketogenic Canada, or just the ketogenic diet. And I remember it going from 30 or 40,000 people in the group or on the Facebook page, which is huge, to I bet you it's got to be approaching 1 million now. So it's just been coming up again, right? It was, we kind of see these trends, we'll say in the grocery stores, from going high fat, low carb, to going back to high carb. Then we saw omega-3 everything, omega-3 pasta, omega-3 butter. And then, of course, we had the coming of, we'll call it gluten and gluten-free. But then now it's kind of coming full circle. It's just like we were talking about with seeing DC training coming back up again in everything. But now keto has taken a gigantic rise again, and there are people capitalizing on that with either products, or we'll say not so much misinformation or misstudies, but a lot of the studies that you see. When we say studies, these are research papers that someone has put out that has tried to prove one way or another, hopefully without any kind of biasy, that this is what's going on. Usually these can be controlled trials, which means they can have double-blind studies, which means they're giving someone a supplement and another group a supplement without them necessarily knowing what it is, and then kind of just study the results from there. Because that is I'll go minorly into that with a lot of the keto stuff I was seeing, is that if they enjoy ketogenic diets themselves, aka the researchers, sometimes they'll skew the results, unfortunately, towards their favor. It's the same thing too as if you are diving really hard into this and you are in a group or something like that, and someone says, here are 50 studies or 50 articles or whatever the heck they want saying this is why keto is better. Well, where's the 50 studies that are showing higher carb, lower fat is better? Because not only are they there, but you can't ignore them, right? It's just like if you want to go talk to someone that likes Mercedes, and all they say, yeah, well, this Mercedes did this, it's got this time, it lasts for this long on the road, does this. Well, without going and looking at the BMW studies, I'm just using these two because they're, they both work. They're both great cars. They're both around the same pricing and things like that. So you can't ignore the BMW studies, we'll call them, because so that's what we're going to try to do here, because I'm pretty darn impartial to the diets, because I have not only used the ketogenic diet myself with success, I've used it with clients with success. But that also, when you even just say, as Austin was alluding to there, if you just say the ketogenic diet, that's immediately, if we had 100 people in a room, 100 people are going to have pretty darn big differences in terms of what they believe, or even what they think they know the ketogenic diet is, because that's where we can kind of start out from there. Is that so? There was 3 kind of standard, or we'll say accepted styles of ketogenic diet when it comes to non-bodybuilding. When it comes to bodybuilding, or when it comes to altering your physique, or whatever you want to call it. So, or even more so, just when you are a weight training individual that is trying to alter your physique. Let's go with that. I just want to really quickly clear up and say that the original ketogenic diet way back in the day, which was medium to high fat with low to no carbs and kind of medium to low protein. Not a lot of people know that, and I don't want to go too hard into that, because I guarantee you, if you're into ketogenic diets, you've probably heard that somewhere. If you haven't, cool. But it was also meant to try and treat and control epileptic seizures. And they found that that's what it did for the most part, is that it really did start to calm, especially children, down in the either the frequency or the length or the severity of their seizures. So that's where it came from. It wasn't what you hear now, which I'll call it the bodybuilding keto diet, or we'll even call it the fat loss keto, or the regular keto. I'm using air quotes, the regular keto, which was, you see now, higher protein than the normal diets, and then low to no carbohydrates, and then medium cut to low fats, or the fats is kind of the ones that you play around with. So the three diets that were kind of there were the standard ketogenic diet, which is exactly what I just said there, which would be higher protein, low to medium to potentially high fats, depending upon where you're at in your, we'll call it weight gain or weight loss or fat loss cycle. Then there was the targeted ketogenic diet, which would be where you remain in a ketogenic state, which means that your brain and your body are now running off of ketone bodies, which is only the option for fuel when your body does not have enough glucose to kind of power everything and has to kind of switch over. Think of it as going from gas to diesel a little bit, so that your body starts to use those for the brain and for the body. And that, so the targeted would mean you remain in ketosis outside of your training, which you would target or time your carbohydrates around your workouts. And then the cyclical ketogenic diet, which would be something along the lines of 5 or 6 days of staying in a ketosis with a refeed day, whereas we would kind of drop the fats, maybe drop the protein a bit, and then really jack up your carbohydrates to kind of do something like a refeed or super compensation, which we can kind of go into later. Yeah. You could even do that, we'll say 3 days during the week of really low carbs and a refeed day, and then 2 lower days again, then another refeed day or a refeed night. So just those are, we'll kind of start from there, kind of give, so without wanting to dive too far into that, we wanted to get this out of the way really quickly, saying that. So those are kind of the 3 different ways that you can originally think of ketogenic diets are. What would you like to add on top of that there, Austin?
Okay, so I would say that what I'd probably say is, in terms of physique enhancement, whether it's bodybuilders or general clients or whoever, I think that probably CKD is probably the most common.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, yeah, because we know that there is value in refeeding, just as far as being in a slight surplus coming out of that deficit. We know that there is value in the carbohydrates as far as raising your leptin levels and helping try to prevent some of those metabolic and hormonal slowdowns. And so I think that CKD is probably most common in bodybuilding. As far as like how many or how often you're refeeding, well, that's kind of dependent on the person. How lean are they? How big are they? What's their metabolism like? All those things. So it could be anything from a day. And when we've talked about refeeding before, we've talked about kind of that it needs to be at least a certain length before it's really that effective. The one meal of carbohydrates really isn't a refeed. So you can always reference that episode again. But anyhow, like I said, CKD is probably most common. I would say SKD, I mean, people use it, but I think they just use it by mistake because they just don't know any difference. They just eat like meat and vegetables for the whole contest prep, because they just don't.
You got it. Exactly.
I don't think it's necessarily intentional. I'm trying to think of, I don't think there's a lot of times where I've used straight SKD for very long, unless it's somebody that's really overweight and we might just, and for whatever reason, they feel good on a keto or whatever. I don't know why they're on it, but they will use it in that regard. And that's more of just the adaptation phase before they actually start refeeding. That's just because they don't need refeeds at that point.
Exactly.
What was the third one?
Targeted, as in like having carbohydrates timed around the workout, so you're only out of ketosis for a certain amount of time, right? Right.
So that one's kind of tricky to me. I don't know. I don't know that I would necessarily even consider that ketogenic diet. I mean, personally, you could do it like that. It's just the fact that you are kicking in and out of keto.
That's right.
And one thing about that, and this is what I'll say about ketogenic diets, and maybe I'm saying it prematurely, but one of the reasons that I would actually have someone do it is, let's say that their calories are at a point where I am having to lower carbohydrates and this person's already kind of kicking in and out of keto. Let's say they're eating, they're below 100 carbs a day. They're feeling that really foggy. They're just like, they're not getting a good energy substrate. They can't focus. Chances are, depending on what their everything else is like in their plan, they might be kind of bumping in and out of keto. Their body's struggling to find, all right, are we burning glucose? Are we burning fatty acids? Are we burning, what are we trying to burn here? Mm-hmm. So that might be an instance where I just go ahead and shift all the way over to keto just because they feel better at that point. And that's kind of why that targeted thing gets kind of tricky, because the carbohydrates are so low to be considered a targeted ketogenic diet that you are going to kick in and out of keto pretty quick. So I don't know. I don't see that one being super useful. That's just kind of my opinion.
Yeah, the only time I found that to be very, very effective would almost be in a non-ketogenic environment, in a sense of, let's say you were that 150 or more carbohydrates a day, and you knew just through trial and error or just kind of stumbling upon it through any other mean that if you have, let's say, well, let's go with that 150. Let's say if you had 50 or 75 of those grams of carbohydrates an hour or an hour and a half before your workout, and you found that really gave you an extra amount of oomph in the gym, I think that's a much better time to have carbohydrates for you. That's not necessarily needing as a blanket statement, or you need to do it in keto, because I found if you, let's say your carbs were at 0 and you had 50 for the day, it's almost going to be a detriment, like you said, to kind of kick you out. I love that term, kick you out of keto just for the workout. Like, if anything, maybe something with like a higher fat with some protein before the workout to keep you in keto, because you do have the ketone bodies fueling the workout. That could be better for you. And then potentially, if you only had that slight amount of carbohydrates, maybe have them after. And that's the only time I've kind of seen that, especially if, let's say, you work out at nighttime and you wanted to have the workout and just keep you've been in ketogenesis all day, or you've been in ketosis all day, and you just want to keep it streamlined, have the great workout, because you're one of the people that are really lucky that do feel great in ketosis, and have that, and then before bed have that carbohydrate to kind of refuel you. Then you have the nighttime to kind of, we'll say, kick you back into keto, and then you kind of wake up feeling great. And you don't have that fog. That's when I've seen it been used optimally, if ever.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's because now I think that the targeted ketogenic diet is just kind of what we call nutrient timing at this point.
You got it. Yeah. And that was it. So it was just outside of when people were doing super low carbs. That's when it was started to call the TKD, as opposed to nutrient timing was just if you had an abundance of them. I think that would be the only thing that would differentiate. I still call it nutrient timing too, because not only that, but no one out there outside of us just giving a minor explanation of it, no one cares or needs to know that it was originally called the TKD. That's just kind of flexing we'll call it the intelligence bicep or whatever, which no one cares, right? For sure.
Right. Yeah. So it's, now I think since nutrient timing is, people are pretty aware of it and the benefits, that that kind of just falls under that category. But going back to the two primary, or we're going back to the CKD or the SKD, what might be an instance that you would use it? So let's at least give people an idea of when you might use it. I gave you one. One idea of when I might use it. Yep. But go ahead and throw one out there.
Yeah, you got it. So outside of exactly that, I'll touch a little tiny bit more on that. When you said that, like, overweight individuals, like just getting into things, I have used it. And it's because to get their insulin sensitivity back, right? Because if someone's has been kind of free fooding, we'll call it, then if you control the carbohydrates, not necessarily to the point of being ketogenic, but even in ketogenic, and if they make the switch and they feel great and they do have a lot of weight to lose, you're not only now are you insulin sensitive, it is going to be more predisposition to pulling the weight from fat, like, because obviously overweight, I'm going to dip into saying obese or more so, even more obese, morbidly obese, that, yeah, it can start just whipping things from the from the fat stores a heck of a lot quicker. Another time that I like to use it is when I want to start setting someone up for refeeds too. Is because then, like, let's say you are anywhere really kind of in your contest prep, depending upon how things are going or whatever, and it's having, like, we'll call them set calories, where it's X amount per day or whatever, or even if you're doing maybe a little bit of carb rotation or carb cycling, is that I like to use it when we're getting down to, like, we'll say the nitty gritty. Then I can make better use of the refeeds, right? Like you mentioned leptin, I like to have a day or so of the overfeeding of carbohydrates, because it does take a day. This is one of the most common misconceptions out there too, and it's still not blinds me that I see this, but you need an extended amount of time to get the benefits of the overeating of carbohydrates. So, like, doing the one meal, I know that I've seen quite a few people still recommending the cheat meal, like the one meal, or, you know, we'll call it, like, it depends upon how long it takes you to eat it. But even so, overeating for the 1 hour or so that it takes you to eat, it's not going to do a heck of a lot for your physiology. That's more psychology, where it's like, okay, thank God I made it through the week. I had my cheat meal or whatever. But all the science points to that you need at least a day of overeating carbs being shoved in to have your T3 levels come back, to have leptin levels stabilize, so that you can actually get the benefits out of it. So I would much rather, especially for recomp purposes or for fat loss purposes, is that to, you know, have the diet days, we'll call them, like the 5 or 6, however many you're going to have them for a week, be the lower carbs, so that by the time you are ready, the body just does soak up the carbs like a sponge. Depends upon their weight too. This is one of the times I weigh a little bit more heavily on what someone weighs, to see kind of when their baseline will come back after the refeeds. But yeah, really set them up so that they at least have a day a week where they're eating carbohydrates, especially if they enjoy them, because then when you get into super compensation mode, and then the body starts, like you said, we start tricking the body in the right way with leptin, we get hunger back again too, ghrelin will spike. And it just, that's another time I start using them, is about that 6-8 weeks out, depending upon the client, depending on how well they do with it. That's one of my favorite times. What's another time that you have when you really enjoy implementing keto?
Trying to think what else I could say. Let's see. I would say maybe in some instances of people that are really sick.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
This is so this is a controversial one. I don't know.
Go in, man. Go in. Yep.
But people that are, it's not okay. So keto, I'm not saying it's a cure for everything, but one of the things that people have to realize is constantly stimulating an insulin response can feed certain things. You know, and having like chronically high IGF levels or whatever. You know, it can feed certain things. Cancer is the one that you always hear about, as far as why keto diet being used as a way to combat cancer growth. And on paper, it makes sense. It does make sense. I don't know how much actual scientific literature there is on it by the medical community, just because I feel like that probably cuts into a lot of their drugs that they want to give to people.
Right. Yep.
But I'm sure if I actually dug into it more, I'm sure there is some. But like I said, anything like high inflammatory, someone with any kind of high inflammatory issue, cancer, anything that inflammation might breed.
Yeah, something like candida overgrowth is one that I've heard too. You got it.
Yeah, so anything that, like I said, inflammation related mainly. Now the trick there though is that when you are using a ketogenic diet, you have to use the right fats, because a ketogenic diet could be really inflammatory if you used, crappy fat sources. If you're just eating, if you're just eating like really high omega-6 fats all the time, for example, like fatty meats that aren't grass-fed, just like, garbage 80-20 ground chuck all day. Well, yeah, that's keto. And you see that stuff a lot too, which I don't think that there's anything wrong with some of that, but there needs to be a balance. You see a lot of these places when they advertise keto, one of the selling points is is some of the really good fatty foods. I mean, like people that eat bacon. Okay, a lot of people like bacon. I mean, why wouldn't they? But at the same time, if you're eating all of these super high inflammatory fats all the time, then that's also an issue. That's really defeating the whole purpose of the healing properties. So, like I said, assuming you're setting up the fats right, if you are eating fatty meats, making it a grass-fed sources, using oils that might be anti-inflammatory and help with, oxidation or the oxidation process and help with your lipid profile and all of those things. But again, it could be a healing diet. I could see it. I've also used it on a really cool case that I used it on where I really got to test it out. It was unfortunate that the person had the issue, but I was really excited to get to try it. The person had rheumatoid arthritis for quite a long time, which if people that don't know what that is, people have probably heard of it, but it's like arthritis, but it's an autoimmune response. And so it's an autoimmune, the body's attacking its own system essentially is what's happening. So I really got to see, okay, what's this going to do? And this person was eating. The cool thing about this was it wasn't like this person was just eating a bunch of junk food and switched to keto, because then I would know, okay, even if I switched to a carbohydrate diet, they're still going to feel better. This person was eating a relatively good diet, by general definition of quote unquote clean-ish foods. I mean, with a little bit here and there. So I got to go full keto mode with them. And in a therapeutic ketogenic diet like this, I was actually setting their protein a little bit, not lower, because this person they were still physique oriented client. They wanted to maintain and gain muscle mass still possibly, or while they lost fat, at least maintain it. So I set that protein pretty much as low as I could. I set it around 0.8 grams per pound of lean body mass. So on the lower end, but enough, I think that the literature proves that that's probably sufficient to at least maintain tissue.
For sure.
Right. So, it wasn't obviously like 300 or 400 grams or anything. So we did that, used mostly, like I said, mostly low inflammatory and anti-inflammatory fat sources, omega-3 supplementation, all that good stuff. And it worked really well.
Yep. Awesome. Awesome news.
So that was just very, very cool to get to kind of see that unfold, in front of me week to week and how good the person felt. So yeah, definitely there's definitely a place for it in the therapeutic community.
Yep, for sure. And then the last one that I like saying that I haven't really heard on too many podcasts or in the we'll call it the public general knowledge is, if someone either wants to try it out or if that they believe that it works the best for them or that they feel great on it. Because that's some feedback. Like, I know that there are coaches that will be very, very set in their ways. And I know you had a great post up on Facebook. It said that you will diet someone in the way that's best for them. And I do the exact same damn thing. Like, it's who am I to say outside of some, super niche variables, we'll say, but like, who am I to say if someone wants to lose fat and they feel better, which means they perform better on more of a keto diet, like I will meet them in the halfway in terms of, like, let's say we end up needing refeeds and things like that. But if someone generally says, hey, I'm a fat loss client, I did keto before with a lot of success, can we try that out? Well, absolutely. Not only you're going to make the client happier by, we'll say, not giving in, but you're working with them. And if they feel better on it, because that's the number one thing. Because I have my buddy Jack, hi Jack, he is we'll call him a carbosaurus, just in terms of he feels better off carbs. He doesn't get the carb tires. He does well off of almost every carb, including all dem dare glutens. So he would be the exact opposite of this. But then there's other people that if they have even, we'll call them the best, most easily digesting carbohydrates, they feel pretty crappy off them. And yeah, that's with enzymes, that's with a good healthy gut bacteria, everything else, but they just feel better, which will in turn make them more adherent. And if they like it, then absolutely go for it. That's the only other time outside, I think, that we talked about that when I would say yes, let's kind of go for it. So I will like to transition into the times where I'll say don't do keto. Is I'm a pretty hard ball against this. Is I really don't like it for off season in terms of trying to maximize muscle gain. There are, and I've tried it. That's the thing. I was just telling Austin before we jumped on here. I dug out my anabolic solution by Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale, which was called the anabolic diet. And that's, it says copyrighted 2002 on here. Like, this is how long ago this was. And it was one of the things that first got me into studying it, that and along with obviously Lyle McDonald's The Ketogenic Diet. But this goes over everything in there. And basically both books point towards it's a personal preference thing, right? And that's it. It has its time. But then if you look at any of today's meta-analysis, which a meta-analysis is taking a lot of things that say pro-keto and a lot of things that say pecan keto, or even just the latest studies, and sees what happened in terms of the body composition, in terms of performance, in terms of everything. And there's two kind of famous studies out right now, and I'm probably going to be bastardizing my quotations of them, but there was one that was done really long term, which was on two cyclists, and one guy got significantly better with the ketogenic diet. He was beating his times, he was getting faster, he felt great, and the other cyclist felt terrible. And so it was like they only, of course, they had two people, and I think in the friggin' study, which is a hilarious amount for a controlled study, but it was polar opposites. So the one did so much better on the we'll call it the carb diet, and one did amazing on the. So that's just going to show you even at the higher levels that it is so body dependent, right? It's I don't know how to explain it to you other than that is one of those things. Give it a whirl or give it an honest thing. But it's almost like religion getting to the point here too, in terms of people we'll call them the keto zealots, and there's the carb zealots. And so, and I bet you, even if we took a keto zealot and put them on carbs in terms of a carb-based diet versus a fat-based diet, they would probably hate it just because of their mind and their heart is telling them this is awful. And then exactly the opposite. You take people that love carbs, and that's why, like, referencing my buddy Jack. Yes, I know it's only one frigging person, but he tried doing that, and like I could see the fog. Yes, he stuck it out. Yes, he fought through the quote-unquote keto flu. Yes, he fought through the keto adaptation period, which is where you will have the one day or so where you switch over in terms of you just feel like absolute garbage, and then you wake up the next day or mid that day and you feel way better because now your body's going from glucose to ketone bodies. And he still just felt awful after that. And so then when he did go back to introducing the carbohydrates, he felt better. Now I will jump right on in and say that I tried the off-season ketogenic diet, which I just raised my fats, kept the protein relatively similar, or if not lower, because I had so much fat to try to do we'll call it the amino acid sparing. And I just didn't have that big push behind me. And I was read, they're like, no, you will actually be more anabolic because apparently the higher type of the right fats will raise your testosterone. Like I believed into all that stuff very heavily. And yes, I tried the MCT oil, which is this refined version of coconut oil that is supposed to be giving you this insane amount of energy, almost to the kin of sugar. I didn't get that. I know some people really like their MCT oil either before a workout or before a run, which is cool. But yeah, that's what are your thoughts on off-season muscle gain and ketogenic diets?
Okay, so there's a couple issues with it, just because the first one being getting the calories is a little bit easier. It can be easier or harder depending on the person, just because obviously fats are more calorie dense, so that makes it easier in that sense. But for some people that need a lot of them, digestion suffers sometimes. You just can't get around it. Even if there's even a few things I can do with people to help kind of produce more liver bile to get that fat digestion going. And even then, sometimes that doesn't work. So it's just might not be realistic for the person to eat, an absurd amount of fat a day. I mean, some of the people that I have that have to eat tons and tons of calories, I mean, it's just not, they're not going to be able to eat 350 grams of fat a day. They don't, now I know people that can, I know people that do fine on it. And I'm not saying it's not possible, because the person I was talking to you about before the show, he does it. and pretty well. So I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just in general that's kind of one of the dilemmas I run into. And then the other would be the idea of the idea of the insulin resistance thing. So it does help. It does help with insulin resistance, and it can help simply because you're not demanding your body to produce insulin very often, other than a little bit. It's still going to produce some because your body has to regulate blood sugar. It's still going to maybe use some of those amino acids to convert to glucose. Your liver is going to produce a little bit of glucose or wherever it comes from. But the idea, you're going to become insulin resistant from being in too big of a calorie surplus for too long. That's one of the main reasons you become insulin resistant. It can happen even without carbs.
Exactly. Yep, you got it.
So don't get me wrong. Carbohydrates definitely speed up that process because they spike insulin more readily and usually larger and more often. So it definitely speeds up the process. But I find that for a lot of people, because in the podcast we're about telling you what works for the most amount of people. And so in the outliers we can't always cite every specific outlier, but if you just go to nutrient timing in general, just time in the carbohydrates when you're going to be most insulin sensitive, utilizing them that way so you can stay insulin sensitive longer in your off season. And what that will do is that just means you're going to be able to have more time for growth before you get fat. That's more of that weight's going to be muscle and less of it's going to be body fat, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So the idea of keto will completely prevent that, I think that's completely false, just because, like I said, too big of a calorie deficit or too long of a calorie deficit, you're eventually going to become insulin resistant at some point, most likely. So
yeah, you said that you can be overfeed with anything, though. The couple with that too, right? Like one of the things that you just brought to my mind was back when people would be really hard on splitting protein and fat meals and the protein and carb meals. I think that's still floating around pretty hard too, in terms of alternating between the two different types of meals. But again, yeah, like did you say 350 grams of carbs, 350 grams of fats? Like that's, yeah, like I've seen to get it in, but now in terms of off season, when you should be, in my opinion, eating a little bit more eclectic, being able to have a little bit more leeway, like going, we'll call it full keto, in limiting yourself from a whole food group, or, having to limit some of the vegetables or whatever like that, that's going to be really hard to stick to in terms of, because like to have just the 350 pure grams of fat, like not like what is pure fats out there, right? Like you're looking at oils, even if you get too high up in the tree nuts, like cashews, there's carbs in there too, peanuts, walnuts, you're going to dip into, then the fiber content goes way out the window on you. So yeah, that's just some of the fun stuff that, we run into in the off season. So then you're mentally only eating these specific foods over the course of the years. So there's just in our opinion, there's just better options for that. So going into how I said about MCTs there. So that's one of the, like, it's still being promoted as a supplement. Like you can buy it in supplement stores, right? And so it's a fat. So MCT, it's medium chain triglycerides that you use for a fat source. So it's now starting to dip in. We see the insurgence of, I would say it's been, 3, 4, 5 years now, of BHB, which is beta hydroxybutyrate, and ketone supplements or ketosis supplements. These have kind of come up now in the last, they've been around for a bit, but now they're starting to get pretty darn popular. There's some multi-level marketing ones out there. Keto OS comes to mind. I know that there are other supplement companies trying to sneak some BHB into their products, and I've used them. I think they have validity at their times, like as in if you are a true keto in terms of you're in ketosis or whatever, and you do use them, I have seen the brain fog be lifted. Just the price point on some of these is getting out of control. I believe it was, I know as here in Canada, it was I want to say $185 for 30 servings, which that's way out of the park for a lot of people on this. And yeah, it did have something, I think it was a like powdered version of coconut oil or something like that. I don't think it was MCT powder. I think it was coconut oil powder or something like this. And so you will have the fats along with this BHB, which is this powdered exogenous ketones. And it's the problem I have with it, and I think you have it too, is that they're trying to just like some of the diets, like some of the ketogenic diets, they're trying to say they cure everything, and right. Like in terms of they are this will not this could this will help you with cancer, this will help you with, like you said, that rheumatoid arthritis, this will help you with everything, and that's just where the marketing gets misleading on that. What's been your experience with the BHB and the exogenous ketones?
Yeah, I've used them. I think I had a similar experience to you in that I think in the right situation that they definitely gave me some mental clarity. I didn't expect a whole lot, so I think that probably helped. That it wasn't just purely placebo, you know. And I'm trying to think of how I actually used them. Was I used them in the morning because I wasn't eating the way my schedule was at the time. I wasn't eating until, I don't know, it was probably 5 hours after I woke up or something.
That's right.
Like that. So I was using them basically in the mornings, just in the fasted state, which technically that's kind of taken me out of a fasted state, but that wasn't really my concern at the time. I wanted to use them as an energy substrate by themselves and see what happened when nothing else was in my system. Mm-hmm. And in that case, I did notice them. I definitely noticed them. I felt that it wasn't energizing and stimulating. I think some people think that it's stimulating. It's definitely not stimulating. It's more of just clears. It provides the brain an energy substrate. And that's what it does. It's just giving you something that's going to probably improve your focus and clarity and just smooth everything out, if you will, at least, temporarily. So with that, I could, let's see, I'm trying to think of when else. The other time that I use them and that I've used them with other people is in a ketogenic diet. So what I did was, let's say we had a ketogenic diet and their calories were just getting low. They're just getting too low. Okay. Mm-hmm, so,
yep.
And I knew that, okay, they were probably not in ketosis at this point. They were probably just burning. It's becoming more like a protein sparing fast.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, so let me see if I can actually use these ketones in here, which supposedly they say that, that the caloric value of the ketones is lower than the caloric value of a gram of fat. So that's where I'm thinking, all right, so if they're about half of what a gram of fat is, give or take, I can add these ketones in there and still cut their calories down, and they're still going to feel like they're in ketosis. And that worked. That seemed to work pretty well. So that would be another instance that they could use it. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest issues I ran into was price, honestly.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yep.
It was just the price. And the person that I did the keto experiment with that I just mentioned, the price there wasn't any, right. issue with price. They didn't care. So, and they're all about trying new stuff. So we did. And it worked. And I think that I could use it in that kind of instance all the time. I think that would work good. I think that you could use it in a fasted state if you wanted. There's somebody that's doing like long fasting periods. Yes, it does technically take you out of a fast, but it does provide some mental clarity, and those would probably be the two main instances that I would use it, to be completely honest.
So then going into that, then the next, we'll say, popular item on the pitching plate here is bulletproof coffee and we'll call them their ancillaries, AKA, which just means some kind of butter Or coconut oil. I've seen sometimes coconut oil, but mostly it's butter in your coffee. Okay, so I will give a little slight bit of a background, at least to what I know of this, which is it came around as this magic fat burning coffee, and for some reason people were starting to go crazy with both coconut oil. Coconut oil was the new savior in terms of health. That you'd see the memes out there saying, oh, I have psoriasis, coconut oil. Oh, I've got acne, coconut oil. Then there was the oil pulling for your teeth. It basically started getting out of control, and so then people were in coconut oil was great in terms of health and all this stuff, but not quite to the point that people were trying to make it out to be. And then for whatever reason, butter in your coffee had this massive upbringing. I don't even know. It's got to be around for 2 or 3 or 4 years now when it first started coming out. And people would think that it's somehow, or people would think, people were being told that some way, somehow, that this kickstarts your metabolism, will keep you. I was on some Facebook discussions, and the misconceptions out there. People think that it will enhance your gut bacteria. People will say that it keeps you skinny. It keeps you full. And that was one of the funnier conversations that I had with someone online. They said, yeah, it's so great because it can keep me in ketosis and will keep me full. And I said, well, of course it will keep you full. You just had some butter in your coffee. You're technically eating. And that blew their mind, because I don't know if they were negating the calories in the coffee, or in the butter in the coffee, or what was going on there. But basically, no, ladies and gentlemen, no, it is bulletproof coffee. This is, and I loved when I heard this, is people were saying that it enhanced the flavoring of their coffee. And then someone said back, if you have to put butter in your coffee to make it taste good, you've got some shit coffee. And I just roared laughing. And someone said, it's the same thing as putting cream into your coffee. And and they said, no, it's not. Because people, if you got to use a ton of sugar and a ton of cream, either you don't like coffee or you have some shit coffee. And so the whole adding the butter is just the same thing as the cream, because people will dribble at least outside of your, triple, quadruple people. The butter they're putting in is not exactly a small amount of butter into the coffee. And the calories add up, and so you're just now shifting the plate. You're just, instead of having the butter or the fat at the meal, you're having it in your coffee in the morning. And it was trying to help people, I think, extend also their fast. I've heard people like that, like, well, now that's not a fast. You had frigging butter, and then now there's even, I think, bulletproof coffee is you. I think you can actually buy that type of coffee. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Where it's like a brand. It's like a brand name.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's in it. Maybe there's like powdered MCTs in it or something. Hell, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be that. And so now let's say you buy that coffee, and now I know there's people out there, because I've seen them that are buying this brand named coffee, and they're adding butter to the coffee still, which now you've got the double and triple whammy to it too. So that's another thing you can kind of, we'll say, busted because it's just not going to work. So I would like to go over now maybe some, we'll say, common misconceptions around how that ketos are either ketogenic dieting is not being used correctly, or why people are seeing or saying, hey, well, I got these excellent results. You guys don't know what you're talking about, in terms of me and Austin. But I'll start out with, I have seen people jump on the ketogenic diet, and of course what happens, they drop weight. And so the reason this is, and hopefully this is starting to circulate more and more and more, is it's water weight. If you lose, we'll say, I've seen anywhere from 2 to 10 pounds in a matter of days, it gets people excited. And I'm not talking just ladies. I've seen men too, especially if they're on a fat loss diet and they want the weight gone now. It will happen, but what did I just say? Weight. This has got nothing to do with fat, but this will, I think, this will be one of those myths, just like weightlifting makes chicks bulky, or that, like, don't eat carbs past 6 or you turn into a fat grumpkin. But this is one of those things I think will never go away, is that when you get onto a low carb diet or lower carb diet, that you will see weight loss, and that in turn in their head means a fat loss. So you know what? It's cool when it happens, of course, and who doesn't, especially inside of losing fat or trying to get the scale down for fat loss purposes, who doesn't get excited by the number going down, right? And it's not to rain on the parade, but just know that this is not an indicator of saying that ketogenic is optimal. All this is doing is taking the water that your body has been holding on to for whatever reason, and that's another thing too. I'll quickly add that your body holding on to water is not necessarily a bad thing. Water is squishy. Water is what will hydrate the muscles. Water will keep you from cramping up. Water does a lot of very healthy processes on the body. So having you live and die by having water on your body as a gauge of success, you should maybe really rethink about that too. So yeah, that's the first one I've got.
Oh man. Yeah. So we started talking about this before we started recording, and I could tell that we were just going to keep talking, and we wanted to make sure that you guys heard it. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of misconceptions around keto, and I think a lot of it's marketing and media. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes with anything, though. Ketogenic dieting has been around forever. It's been around a really long time, but it's reemerging as the cure-all and the optimal solution for fat loss. But at the end of the day, we know, most people know that calories in and calories out are king. So, that's really where everything starts, obviously. And then there's all the intricacies as far as your hormones go and your metabolism and all that. So yeah, it is unfortunate that it's being marketed that way, because they're eating these. There's a lot of companies that have the ketogenic food and snacks, and they're advertising things. Like we said before, the paleo crowd is often connected to ketogenic, and that's not to say that paleo is strictly ketogenic, because it's not. They do have carbohydrates, and they can have carbohydrates, but there is a paleo version of keto as well. And they have a lot of foods. A lot of the sites have snack foods and things like that, and people just kind of aimlessly eat on these foods, and they think, okay, this is, I'm in ketosis, which, I mean, they might be, they might be in ketosis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lose any fat. And the initial weight loss is just water, like you said. And it doesn't, and the crazy thing is about that weight loss too, is that even with people that I work with sometimes, they know that it's water, but it doesn't matter. It's just, they're just excited that weight initially had come off. You know what I mean? They know that it's water. They know it's not fat. Like, they know they lose 5 pounds of fat in the first 4 days. Mm-hmm. They know, but it's exciting to them. And I can see how, I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, that if it gives them that nice little mental boost, but you also have to understand that you're not going to keep losing 5 pounds of fat or 5 pounds of weight a week. That's just not, that's not what's going to happen. So
that's right.
And that goes back to the marketing of the the products we talked about too. The few that we mentioned there, a lot of those are marketed in the same way. That bulletproof coffee, like you mentioned, you talked about you're adding calories to your coffee. If you're fasting, if your people are like, hey, can I do intermittent fasting and have bulletproof coffee? I'm adding 2 tablespoons of grass-fed butter to my coffee. I'm like, dude, 2 tablespoons is 30 grams of fat.
30 grams of fat, which is 270 calories.
I'm thinking, no, I mean, you can, I guess, if you want, but you're not fasting anymore. And the thing is, those fats are going to take longer to digest than carbohydrates. So even if you have quicker digesting fats like the MCTs and the butter that has, that would have medium chain triglycerides in it, coconut oil.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's still going to take a while to digest. I mean, you're not fasted anymore. So, and the idea and people adding this stuff and not accounting for the calories is just absurd, because fat, as we know, is the most calorically dense macronutrient. So oils, they add up really quick. I mean, I don't know how you do it with your clients and stuff, but when I add oils, let's say it's extra virgin olive oil or coconut oil or whatever I add to nutrition, it's, for most people, I'll have them weigh it in grams, especially when we're getting into contest prep situation, just because I want to know that, okay, they're not just like, throwing a bunch in a tablespoon and like haphazardly just tossing it into their food. Yeah, so I mean, like I said, those fats are definitely calorically dense. They're not free foods. They're not fat burning foods either. Gosh, that drives me nuts. Like,
yeah, I know, right? For sure.
Yeah. So go for it.
Yeah. So the one of the next ones I've heard is that now that I'm consuming just fat, or now that I'm not having high or any carbohydrates in my diet, now I can really dip into my fat stores, and carbohydrates impairs that. So why would I have carbohydrates in my diet at all? Blah blah blah. Insulin raising. Blah blah blah. And I think you touched on that earlier, but everything raises insulin. Like whey protein raises insulin more than most carbohydrates. So does meat. So you can't escape. We'll call, as Alan Aragon likes to call it, the insulin fairy. You can't escape that, because insulin by itself does not make you gain fat. Like that's the in people in that. And that's one of the things you see, like guys like Gary Taubes and all the other ones that really are, we'll call them the keto zealots, that really, really push and say, oh, the insulin is what's causing you to get fat. Like, yeah, potentially skyrocketing your insulin will make you hungry for sure, or make you hungrier, but that in itself is not what's making you lose fat slower, or what's making you gain weight quicker. So just because, too, that you're not seeing any carbohydrates come into your diet does not mean you're now dipping into your fat stores more. Especially like if you consume this fat, like let's use your well, I won't go that high with the 350, but if you're consuming 100 or 150 grams of fat a day, your body still has to use that. So it's not going to be magically going into your fat stores on your body just because it sees more fat. And then all of a sudden, now that's the man. Oh, the carbs were stopping me from going into the fat stores. No. That doesn't happen. But it sounds plausible, because you have to think that it's the funny thing about fat is that it's another name. Like it doesn't change other than it goes to triglycerides or whatever, and gets stored on the body. But there is fat on the body. We don't say we have carbs on the body, right? Because there's no. But if we did, and that's one of the marketing ploys, that if you imagine if it was switched around, it was carbs. You say, oh, I got carbs stored on my body. Then people go, oh, well, then if I have carbs, and that will liberate more carbs from my body, and just, right? It's the same thing. Like protein is not on the body. It is stored in, obviously, in terms of being amino acids, which therefore create the muscle tissue. So muscle, which is the protein that's on the body. So it makes it sexy, right? You know what I mean? If you can say you eat fat, you'll lose fat type of thing, or encourages more fat to, like, just a bunch of, that's kind of fun stuff too, right? And then also, if someone just jumps into, and they will say they've never dieted before, and then outside of, yes, the initial, they see the water weight or whatever, and they think that ketogenic dieting is this Jesus of dieting. They just probably had a crappy diet before, and so then I challenge them too. If you were to have, switch out and we'll say match calories, match protein, which side note, that is usually what people don't do in these frigging ketogenic studies. Well, first off, you've already heard us say that we do enjoy using ketogenic diets at certain times. I have done it with success. I do feel that my brain feels great running off of ketone bodies, but in studies, they will always have, not always, I'll strike that, most of the time that I've seen, they don't match the frigging protein. So in other words, if I want to go in and make a study, and I want to see if high fat, low carb, ketogenic diet, in terms of, for our purposes, is better, and I don't keep the protein at the same level as I do with the carbohydrate. Like, let's say I have 100 grams of protein and 100 grams of fat, and then the next when I'm studying it with the carbohydrates, I have something like 70 or 60 grams of protein, and then match the carbs, which would be something around 220 or so, anyways, to match the calories. Then of course I'm seeing a difference in muscle mass because now I don't have the protein there. So that's one of the things you say, oh, well, all the studies point to this. Well, yeah, I know, but are they matching the frigging protein? If you have got the protein set at a level that has been calculated for you, and then you've got the calories around the same, and you play around with the fat and the carbohydrates, I would borderline be willing to bet everything I own and will own that you will see the damn same loss in fat outside of, we'll say, that the extreme contest prep stuff, when you need the refeeds, you need the leptin, the T3, the thyroid, everything is the same. I would implore you to try and find, outside of your own bias-y, a better way to lose fat, because it just won't. And so that's why I was saying that if you just had a crappy diet before and now you jump on keto and go, oh my God, keto is the answer. Well, have you tried everything else yet? That's the only other we'll call them big misconceptions that I happen to see around, we'll say, being keto is the best. And I also want to bridge into, I know I've said it now 2 or 3 times, I want to say that again, is that I am not Mr. high carb, low fat. Like I do prefer to diet my clients with more carbs than fats for the most part. I have found that for performance, especially for weightlifting, I found that my girls and boys, they feel better on it, and that's just how I will say the cookie crumbles. I've seen better results with this, because I will flat out tell you as a, we'll say, a personal coach story, that way back in the day when I was first studying ketogenic, and I bought into we'll call it the keto hype. This is before it had its massive resurgence here, back when it was just kind of, they were going in between whether what the media couldn't really make up its mind if they wanted to be high carb or low carb at this time. This is around, I want to say 2005, 2004 or so, and up until 2009 or 10, around then, I was dieting myself and clients on a more ketogenic diet for fat loss, and it wasn't quite seeing what I wanted. I was seeing lots of muscle loss, sadly, and in terms of myself and in terms of others, I wasn't seeing that big zip. However, I will point out really quickly too that caffeine will hit you, as will other stimulants, a heck of a lot harder during keto diets. And the reason why this is, I'm not going to go into the science behind it, because I don't even know the science behind it, but caffeine does get impaired when carbohydrates are present. It's just the way that it works. Like if you were to have a whole bunch of caffeine at the same time as a whole bunch of carbohydrates, they will fight each other. But now if you have no carbohydrates or low carbohydrates with higher fat and higher protein, you will get more of a zip out of it too, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But that also will go into why some people will feel that the ketogenic diet is better, because now they feel the stimulants more, they can maybe feel more alert, or they're masking the job of which the food is doing. Because I know I was dipping into that too, and then I found that out. I saw some of the science on that. I remember Justin Harris was talking about that, especially for off-season. He was saying don't have a ton of caffeine in your off-season with a lot of carbohydrates, because it'll impair the uptake of the carbs, not only impairing your strength, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole other topic, but that's another reason why I've seen people that will say move over towards keto. So then when I started dieting clients more along the lines of higher fat, when I was paying attention to guys like Chris Aceto, paying attention to guys like Scott Abel, and saying, no, you don't need to go full keto all the time. And they were the ones that really got me caught on to doing refeeds and things like that properly, super compensation diets, and going into things like that. So that's kind of been my evolution of coaching. And as I said earlier, I will diet someone. Of course I will, if they prefer ketogenic styles. Like, who am I to say to the client, no, that doesn't work? Because if they believe in it more so, and that's the most powerful driver we have for, again, mind and body, right? If your mind believes that the ketogenic diet is the best, let alone if you genuinely do feel the best off that, who am I to rob that of you? Especially if things are going metabolically the way that we want. You can meet me in the middle with maybe a higher carb day or two, or a higher carb meal or two, then yeah, absolutely, go full tilt on that. So that's kind of what I've been seeing in my vast amount of years now of coaching. So what have you noticed anything too in your changes of that? Like, have you noticed that you enjoy clients on a certain style of diet, or is it still going to fall into personal preference? Or I'm not necessarily talking contest prep purely, but I'm talking just, we'll say, losing fat as a general.
Personal. I mean, preference and individuality. I mean, I would say that I don't use keto is not like a primary thing. It's not like my typical go-to or anything. I couldn't put a percentage on it, but it's definitely not what I would typically just go right to it. I don't just hear the word fat loss and think, okay, keto, here we go. But with that said, I'm definitely not going to say no if the situation's right and the context is right and the person is the right person for the situation. But yeah, I pretty much echo everything you said. I thought the part about about utilizing more fats while eating more fat was just kind of comical, because it's like, I don't, to me, it seems like a really logical and easy thing to understand. I know not everyone thinks the same. We think about this stuff and how stuff works. That's just the way our brain works. That's why we do this job. But, when I'm thinking, okay, you're eating more fat, so you're going to be burning more fat. I'm like, no, you're eating more fat, so you're going to be burning more dietary fat that you're eating.
I know, but it's the sexiness of the marketing, though, right? It's like, well, if you're only seeing fat, and let's say your fat gets low, it's going to be more encouraging to say, oh, hey, I already have this fat here. Let's use this. It's colorful language, borderline rhetoric. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun because you can make anything sound plausible if you color your language the right way. So yeah, I love that you said that to me, but that's the thing, Austin. It's not to you, you know what I mean? Like, me and you would be able to pick out the snake oil stuff a lot quicker than the general population, and that's the beauty of why, grab a coach, at least for a little bit, so that they can not only challenge your beliefs in the right way, but they can lay out enough science for you, lay out enough evidence for you, lay out enough anecdotal evidence for you in terms of themselves or their clients or things like that. But you nailed it, man. That's I love that you said that. Like, to me, it doesn't seem logical, but now to other people, the reverse, or what I said, seems logical, and that's still something I like to take into consideration on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. It goes, like you said, it's marketing. It's all wording, marketing, whatever you want to call it. It's you could say the same thing about carbohydrates. Oh, if we eat tons and tons of carbohydrates, we're going to burn more glycogen. I'm like, well, probably not. I mean,
I know,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you could pitch it, you could make it sound sexy and make it, that's everything. It's make it sound good, or have that sensationalist type of thing and get people excited or whatever, so
you nailed it.
Unfortunately, logic and bringing people back to reality is far from sexy and appealing to a lot of people.
Hey, but all we need to do, man, is get you to have your shirt off, and then we'll start talking about it. And before you know it, now it is sexy, and now it is appealing, because we'll have you holding a banana, and bam, sexy, and he's appealing a banana. So what more do we?
So there we go. So now we just need to do every video. I need to start doing my Q&As with my shirt off.
Yeah, that's right. And at the very end, just have the banana say, "I hope that was appealing to you."
Oh, God.
Well, I hope that was a little bit different of a ketogenic podcast for you there. We kind of went over some things that I felt that I haven't heard. I've heard a little bit too technical, and I've heard a little bit too layman, in terms of people don't really go into the whys, or what the diets do, or what they could do, or when they could be used. So hopefully this was a little bit of a different spin on ketogenic diets for you. And so from Austin and Marty at the Mind Body Broadcast, we will see you next week.
See you guys.